On today's episode of the DeRaud-Messinger Show, we're giving out our grades, Dylan. Texas Longhorns defense of 2023. What did they get? Longhorns fans, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. It's greatly appreciated. And don't forget to check us out at HornSports.com for all the latest in Texas news. Now, Dylan, yet again, we are the teachers of this young Texas Longhorns class. We're not getting our Genes Friday today, Dylan, but we are giving out our final grades. And for teachers, sometimes that is just as important of a day because it's over, Dylan. We can finally just get the grade book out. But we must start with the group that will give us a calming presence. The defensive line for Texas is the first group. Dylan, quite possibly the stars of our classroom, definitely sitting up front in class, definitely raising their hands at every question, answering pretty much every question correctly. Maybe not every single one, but 19 out of 20 correct. What would you give this group?
Yeah, Devon. And if they got any questions wrong or they didn't get 100 on their test, they're going back for corrections later on. Get that grade back up, doing the extra
Oh, they're
work.
doing the
But
extra work. The dirty
oh
work, the
yeah,
extra work. They got to do what they got to do.
exactly. They're going in early, they're leaving late. Gotta love it. But yeah, I got them at an A+, Devon. I think no surprise there, especially when you're arguably the best unit for Texas when it comes just to position groups. They were also the number 3 rush defense in the nation, allowing 82.4 yards per game. And they stifled running backs like Ollie Gordon, Taj Brooks, and they handled Dylan Johnson pretty well in the Sugar Bowl. So again, lot to like out of this group, as well as penalties up front. Only 4.5 penalties per game and 34.6 per yards per game from penalties. Right, so they did a lot of great things. Devontae Sweat was, I believe, the interior lineman of the year, right, Devin? If I'm getting
Sweat was the
that correct.
defensive player of the year in the Big
Defensive
12
player. That's right.
conference.
Yep.
But also, yes, interior lineman, let me check. What award was
There's an
that?
award
There's so many.
for it.
The
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Outland Trophy. I didn't want to
Yep. That's
misquote
the
there.
one.
The Outland Trophy, which, yes,
Yep.
as you're saying, lineman, not defensive lineman,
Yep.
offense or defense. Quite the award to be receiving, Dylan. And of course, for Sweat, who wasn't at his full potential earlier in his years, it was nice to see him round out
Yeah.
on a good note. But continue on.
Yeah, I mean, because we're going to look back on these two players, especially after their NFL careers, and be like, I can't believe Devontae Sweat and Byron Murphy were 2 tackles on the same defensive line in college because they are absolute beasts. Sweat had 45 tackles on the season and 8 tackles for loss, and Byron Murphy had 29 tackles and 8.5 tackles for loss. So those guys were really the bread and butter of this defense. You would have liked to see more production out of Ethan Burke on the edge, but again, he's only a sophomore, so there was inexperience on the sides. But again, up front, Heath, the defense, you were not able to run the ball between the gaps against this team.
Yeah, just to harp on it yet again, Outland Trophy winner caps off the class. And Dylan, what did you give that grade again?
That was A+.
A plus. See, Dylan is a nice grader, and I am too, Dylan.
Yes.
But maybe as nice as I
Oh.
should be? No. I'm going to give it an A, and the only reason, as Dylan was
Just a
alluding to,
stickler.
was that edge pressure. They got to the quarterback quite often, but a lot of times, Dylan, they just didn't bring him down. Next season, they're going to have to, add some sacks to the sack column and try to just stop quarterbacks from throwing the ball down because that's what ended up injuring the secondary quite a bit. Of course,
Yeah.
football is a team game, and the secondary quite often, Dylan, was being torched. But some of that, just some of that, not all of that, can be
Yeah.
attributed to the lack of sacks. But if it was just a defensive tackle rating that I would be giving out here, for sure an A plus. As Dylan said, I think in 10 years when you look back at this team and you see Sweat and Murphy were both lined up next to each other pretty much on every play, you wonder how this team, didn't win every single game. It was quite incredible.
Yeah.
Like Dylan said, Ethan Burke has some room for improvement, but even Burke was one of the more surprising players in his first year starting for the Longhorns and has the potential, given his intangibles, to take that next step the next season. Baron Sorrell as well. Would have liked to see a little bit more out of him in terms of overall sack production. But yet again, should not be understated. This defensive front, as Dylan talked about, shut down opposing running backs like crazy. You pretty much could just count them out. I mean, Oklahoma State,
Yeah.
Ollie Gordon did not do anything, and he was really the sole offense.
Yep.
So, Dylan, yet again, I'm gonna give it a flat A. And you talked about it before the video, Dylan. This group might have been the hall monitors
Yeah.
for this team. What do you think? Just the ones that were keeping the rest of the team in check. No unnecessary bathroom breaks.
Well, they set the tone because we're talking about years past with this Texas team where it felt like if the other team wanted it more, they were able to just kind of take it, even though Texas was more talented. And I think with Murphy and Sweat, they really led this team's mentality of we're just going to take it from you this time, but also leave nothing for you at that point. Like
Oh,
when you're
exactly.
holding running backs that are some of the best in the nation under 50 yards, you're showing the other team that you're not going to be able to do this thing that you've shown that you can do really well all year. And we're going to make it. You're going to really feel that too. You're going to really have to feel like you're going to have to do extra stuff on the outside, especially just receiving the ball and quarterbacks having to force throws, which ultimately got the secondary in position for some interceptions. So that was the biggest thing for me when it came to just the A+ is if the other class, especially the rest of the defense, wasn't pulling their weight, they could look at the guys up front and see that they were every play were on top of it.
100%. And while these students still were great in our class, I think in the lunchroom with the opposing teams, they were the bullies
Oh,
that were asking for lunch
oh my
money.
gosh.
You know.
You got to
Yeah.
be careful. One of these days, they're just going to eat you because
I see that extra muffin you got in your plate. That's mine now. Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, definitely the favorite players I think either of us had to watch this season for the Longhorns. The next group we have is the linebackers, led by Jalen Ford, the star player, arguably for the team. Of course, Sweat ended up being the almost Heisman candidate. Dylan, yet
yes,
again, I'm still upset about that. Couldn't have given him at least some love to make a trip to New York.
it's a
But
quarterback award.
it's a quarterback award, unfortunately. But Jalen Ford, Jet Bush, Anthony Hill Jr., Gabenda, there's a couple others. But overall, Dylan, how did you feel about this group as a unit?
I think it was a little bit of a flip. It felt like the linebackers were the big portion of this defense, especially with Overshown and Jalen Ford. Jalen Ford he had more tackles last year than he did this year. Now you could say some of that had to come from running backs were not getting past the first four, so there was just less
There
opportunities
was
to
a
get
bit of
tackles
that.
there. Yeah, but he still had over 100 tackles, 10 and a half tackles for loss. He had two less interceptions than he did last year. So I wouldn't say that was necessarily disappointing, but you did miss out on some of that. But again, I still think he was a great player, setting the tone for the linebackers as well as you saw Anthony Hill over the course of the season change from the feral rabbit that you just send at people,
I don't think he was a rabbit, Dylan. He was an attack dog.
or attack dog, however you want to say it. But it was feral nonetheless, where he was going at people. But you kind of saw him be more balanced out as a linebacker rather than just shooting the gaps and missing an assignment. He was showing more patience. But again, he's a freshman linebacker, so it's going to take time. I think this is a common theme that I keep bringing up with some of these players, obviously. But just you saw the inexperience to start, and over time, especially with the coaching staff, they got better. But again, it's very hard to become a complete player when you only have a season of starting experience at that point. So I think there was a lot left on the table. I think linebackers could take a giant jump because I expect Anthony Hill to be one of the best in the nation in the next 2 to 3 years. But again, I think there was just a lot left to desire at that point.
What was your final grade again? Was it a B plus or?
It was B plus, B plus.
I'm
You don't
going.
see many of that for me, but B plus.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a good grade or a bad grade for Dylan. I'm also going. Kidding. I'm also going B plus. Anthony Hill Jr. definitely, as Dylan said, has the potential to be one of the best players, not only at his position, but potentially in college football. Give it a couple years with the trajectory that he's on right now. Of course, he's got to keep it up, but he's definitely, Dylan, the freshman in our class that's probably in the class designed for seniors. I mean, he
Mm,
played to a high level this
yep.
season. But overall, as a group, I do go B plus. I do think there was some things that this group could have worked on a little bit more. Yet again, we were talking about edge pressure for the D linemen. I think the linebackers could have gotten a little bit more help in terms of just overall, sack production and
Mm.
just creating pressure on the quarterback, and could have helped out the secondary a little bit. But the secondary, Dylan, yet again, was kind of on their own island in terms of some problems that we'll get to in a second. But Jet Bush, not too high in production. Gabenda, yet again, nothing crazy in production. But those two guys were actually quietly some of the more consistent players for this team, Dylan. And yet again, I know Jet Bush, a lot of people like to joke he was a former walk-on. But walk-ons are people too, Dylan. Bush did
They are.
did the job that he was assigned to do and did quite well yet again, B plus overall. And as Dylan mentioned, Ford maybe not the caliber of year that he had the season prior, but to harp on his point as well, I think a lot of that was just because the defensive line was so good this past season.
Yeah.
But last year he did create a little bit more in the turnover category as Dylan was talking about. In the first half this year, it seemed like he was on the same track, but didn't end up getting as many. But yet again, still was that star of the linebacker core. And if he were to get a grade, probably an A plus as well. So what am I talking about? But Dylan, now we talk about, it just pains me to say, this is a group that needs to come after class and do those test corrections, but just is not doing them, Dylan. The secondary, the DBs. How do you feel about this group? It has a lot of potential, don't get me wrong, but that's almost why this group was an upsetting point this season, because the group just did not match the potential, but are still, for the most part, very young.
Yeah, and a lot going to be contributed to it. I think the lack of sacks that you'd like to see from the front seven, you could attribute it to a little bit to why this defense, was seemingly having to be caught in a situation where they're having to cover for 5 seconds or so, and obviously a guy's going to get open at that point. But when you look at it, and especially when the narrative going into the college football playoff games and when they would go up against good teams, it was if this team has a quarterback that can throw the ball like Penix, the secondary is going to get exposed. And you saw that again because they are 116th in pass defense nationally and 73rd in completion rate at 61%. So there was things you like to see. I thought Jahdae Barron played very well. I thought when we were talking about safeties, I think Jaron Thompson showed what he could do back there, especially with the interceptions he had over the course of the season, as well as Michael Taft, Devon, who came out of nowhere if we're talking about walk-ons as well. So
there we go.
Yeah, there was a lot to like and a lot of growth from a lot of guys that you weren't necessarily expecting, although you were expecting it from Jahdae Barron. But again, there was a lot of times where Ryan Watts was going up against the best players just offensively, and was just kind of getting beat. And some of those you can contribute to luck, especially in the game against Washington, where he almost had the punch out and the ball just got through. I think he just mistimed it a little bit. So you hate to see those, but that's why I've got them at a C, Devon, just with them being kind of the position unit that you would have liked to see better things out of.
I also gave a C. And talking about luck, Dylan, look at the final game, and Malik Muhammad, I believe it was, got his hands on a pass, full body extension, tipped, and then I forgot who it was that caught it in the end zone, but it was just a layup catch for Washington, but great concentration to keep their eye on the ball. Dylan, this group, I'm just going to list some of the names so that people understand who we're talking about in its totality. We've got Ryan Watts, Jahdae Barron, Malik Muhammad, Jaron Thompson, Michael Taft, Terrence Brooks, Gavin Holmes. There's a couple others sprinkled in there, but those are the main players, I would say, by the time the season came to a close. I'm also giving a C. Dylan just wasn't the greatest of, overall DBU performances that Texas likes to claim that they have. It's been a little while since the secondary has been as strong as they've tried to get it to be. Jaron Thompson, Dylan, I do agree. He has some flashes, but unfortunately, like all the players on this list, and Dylan's called out a couple, they all had moments of just absolute pain. Even Jahdae Barron, who I think was probably the best secondary player, or defensive back as I should say, in this group, even he had a tough game in the championship game of the Big 12 conference. But still, don't let that be misconstrued as hate towards Jahdae Barron, because Dylan in the secondary, yet again, he's my favorite player and probably one of the more favorite players to watch on the team just because of his hustle and not afraid to get dirty at the line of scrimmage and get a tackle for the loss by dropping that helmet, Dylan. Something that a lot of Texas fans were hoping they'd get out of a guy like him, but also needing in order to get this far in the college football playoff. But the shocking thing, Dylan, I know everyone's, whoa, shocking. Is there some sign of good news out of Devon here? Well, the team somehow ranked 47th in pass efficiency defense. 47th, of course, is not anything elite. It's not top 10. But given Texas's low rankings, just in overall pass yardage allowed, it is somewhat surprising. This group was tied for ninth in interceptions in college football, which is part of that pass efficiency defense rating. But for all the bad that this group had, they were able at times, Dylan, yet again, at times, were able to come
Yeah.
around and get that turnover that really changed the game. Jaron Thompson, I believe, had one against Alabama. Just
Yeah.
wasn't consistent enough, and that was almost the story of this Texas Longhorns team overall. Now, Dylan, we got to end it out with some love. We can't end it poorly. Let's get our mindset right. We're back in the 8th block class. The class is almost done. The day is almost done. We got the special teams unit. Now, for analogy's sake, this group, Dylan, is likely the class that is in PE right now, while every other team member, every other
Mm.
unit is in, a difficult class like a math or science. Special teams just loving life. They're doing their job. They're acing the dodgeball. But Dylan, Ryan Sanborn, Bert Auburn, the kick return, the punt return, what would your overall grade be?
I had an A minus. I know your boy for Auburn. It was a legacy year for
My
you,
boy.
Devin. Beginning of the season, some people were out on him, but you stuck with it, and he led the nation in field goals and field goal attempts. So great year out of the kicking group. I thought the punting was great as well. I have it at A minus because there's more you would like to see in like the kick return game, punt return game, especially with just more touchdowns and more yards out of it. But again, never felt like the special teams lost in the game. And in a lot of ways, special teams was able to, obviously help in the ways that they should with those key 3 points when it came from just field goals, Devin. So lots to like this season. But again, the biggest thing is for special teams is not losing your team the game. And I don't think that they did that this year.
No, I agree. And Sark likes to preach about complementary football. Dylan, the special teams unit did its job in pinning teams back and converting the 3 points when they need the 3 points, and definitely set this team up to succeed. And Dylan, yet again, Bert Auburn for MVP. I mean, there were several games where it seemed like he might actually win the team MVP award for that individual game. Definitely overall a bright spot for this team. But with that being said, still a high grade. I'm giving an A minus as well. Just the kick return and punt return games could have some improvement. Worthy back there in punt return for the most part was pretty dang solid, especially as the year went on, Dylan. I must say the Baylor game was a nightmare for both the Worthy and Whittington in terms of punt returns, but you look at the final score and there was no real worry by the end of that. But as the season went on, like I said, he started fielding punts in better positions, not costing the team yards, and was burning them quite often. I think he had one punt return touchdown this year, which, Dylan, they're hard to come by unless you're Devin Hester. A punt return touchdown is pretty difficult to come by. He did his job. And yet again, if it was just a year-end rating, just that final maybe 6 games, I think he deserves an A. But overall, the group A minus. Kick return, yet again, Keelan Robinson out there with the cast on in the Washington game. That's not his fault. I can't point that to him. Coaching's got to be a little bit better there. Don't have someone that's one-armed out there fielding kick returns. It sounds so bold, but Dylan, sometimes it's the
Hey,
simple plays that end up being the big ones. Washington took advantage of that, and he didn't end up doing anything crazy in terms of costing the team. But it's just sometimes 5 yards, Dylan, is a 5 yards gain that was much needed, even
yeah.
if it's between the 15 and the 20-yard lines. But overall, even Keelan Robinson had his moments and the several guys that were back there. But as Dylan was mentioning, did we have enough Devin Hester moments for this team? I don't know. Do you think so?
Well, that's A plus territory if you got Devin Hester back there. But no, did not think there was enough of that. But again, there was definitely the key moments where they would flip the other side of the field for Texas to have good field position. It's just I think in the majority of the games, it really came down to just the offense and defense making plays rather than the special teams changing the course of the entire thing.
No, exactly. But yet again, Sanborn, Auburn, and for the most part, Worthy, Keelan Robinson. I think Blue was back in kick return for a bit. They all were pretty dang solid for Texas, and definitely, Dylan, you can see the improvements for this group as well, especially within the past couple years where at times it was a little nightmarish, I must say. But breathe in. Everything is okay, Texas fans. But more importantly than our grades, let us know your defensive grades. Where did we get it right? Where did we get it wrong? Are you aligned with us? Let us know down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, have a great rest of your day.